2002 cumulative installed PV capacity, 1,600 megawatts. PV is the largest growth industry in the world. It's got right now, it's got an 80% growth rate worldwide. It's huge. Oh, by the way, that's supposed to be a photon. Electricity is the movement from electrons from the outer shell of one atom to another. I give presentations in the school, and I use those flashlights that you shake. And if you look inside of those, there's a magnet and there's a coil of wire. And every time that magnet shoots through those coils of wires, it makes the electrons move. I tell the kids that that's what the guys do down at the power company. They're all shaking flashlights. But, you know, the generator's spinning and they're making the steam. It's a boron atom. There's 2 electrons in the center, and then there's 3 hanging on the outside. The outer ring, that's what they call that, usually has 4 electrons in it. So this has what's called an electron hole. It's got a spot that stuff can move through. PV is the movement of electrons from the outer shell of one atom to the next, but it gets a little bit more complicated because we're using these photons. Think of a photon as a cue ball in a game of pool, and the electrons as the 8-ball. And when a photon, and the photons that are coming through space all have different amounts of energy in them. They're not all the same. So they hit some electrons and they make them move, you know, a little bit. They hit other ones and they make them go right off the board. Okay? The tie that binds, okay, and we're talking about bonds, electrochemical bonds. Silicone is, and then you hear about that all the time because right now, or at least in the last several years, it's been in short supply. It's the common bond, okay? Then they dope the silicon, which is 4 electrons, so its outer ring is full. They dope it with either boron or phosphorus, and there are other chemicals they can do it with, but those are the main ones that we're using right now. The boron has 3 electrons in the outer shell, so it's positively charged, and there's a hole in the matrix. The phosphorus has 5 electrons in the outer. It's negatively charged, and it's got 1 electron sitting out there with 1, they call them covalent bonds, you know, basically some Scotch tape holding it to the rest of the thing. And then sunlight carries an atom called a photon, and when the photon hits that single electron, it makes it move. It's a game of pool. And they float up to the top once you do that. Hopefully I go the right way. Oops, I went the wrong way. That's kind of what it looks like, the structure of an atom. There's the silicon is the most common element on the Earth. It's sand. The only problem with it is that it has to be pure. So they heat it up. It's very energy intensive. They heat it up so all the impurities float to the top. They skin off the photons, and then they grow these crystals. This is a silicon crystal. You can see it's very organized and it's very tight. The covalent bonds, that's what I'm talking about there. This is what it looks like at the atomic level. There's your boron atom, there's your phosphorus atom. You can see the boron's got a hole, a short one, and there's your free electron. That's your extra electron that's not connected too well. This one, it shows you the phosphorus is on the top, the boron's on the bottom, and when they knock them loose, they float to the top. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. You see all the wires on the top of solar arrays? The reason those wires are there is electricity takes the leaf path of resistance, and so it gives the electrons a way to go. And it follows, goes through a light, does work, and then it comes back and recombines. It's very, very clever. I was a machinist for 30 years working on engines, and never have I ever seen anything that works so well with no moving parts. When I figured this out or read about it, I was absolutely amazed. This is why they warranty these for 25 years. There's nothing to go wrong. You can break a junction. These things can come loose, but anymore, that just doesn't happen much. I'm showing you this to show you the wires on the top. Sometimes I get hung up on this, and I'm going to jump through it. Once you get a cell made, okay, every cell is a half a volt, and then the amperage changes depending on the diameter, okay? The amperage also changes depending on the intensity of the solar radiation hitting the cell. So when the sun's shining on the cell and a cloud comes over, your voltage doesn't change, your amperage does. The way they build the modules is they start putting these cells in series and parallel till they build up whatever voltage they want. Single crystalline is the most efficient solar cell, and when we're talking about efficiency in solar cells, we're really saying, okay, how much can we get on your roof? And how much can we really get off of your roof in terms of production? That if the price is equal between all of these, the only difference is going to be is the amount of square footage it takes up to get the same amount of thing. There's a couple of different processes. There's the CZ process. It's a Czechoslovakian or Polish word that I can never pronounce. And then there's ribbon growth. Ribbon growth is evergreen, and all the rest come out of this CZ process. Polycrystalline is cast. They've gotten it up to 22%, but most of it in the industry is, again, sitting there around 12, 18% when they go to mass production. Thin film, they're using electronic disposition, uses a lot less material. And we heard for years how it was going to be less expensive. But quite honestly, out in the industry right now, they're all about the same price. There's 3 different ones. There's Amorphous Silicon, copper indium diselenide, and cadmium telluride. Some of these have issues on the elements that they're using to make them, but they've all agreed to take them back at the end of their life and reprocess them. So, you know, these are the up-and-comers. This hasn't changed very much. I mean, you read all the time how, boy, we've got the latest breakthrough, and I think now it's organics and nanotechnology, and out in the real world, we really haven't seen a lot of change in what's available. I certainly hope they come through with a breakthrough and the price of PV comes down, but I wouldn't use that as a reason not to buy or to move forward if you're interested in it. This is the difference in they look. Here's a single crystalline. You can see they're round, so that you get a lot of wasted space. The polycrystalline is a little less efficient than this, but they close up the gaps, so it comes out the same. And then this is the amorphous technology. Current and voltage output over a single cell under varying light levels, and that's what I was explaining to you before. The current doesn't change much, or the voltage doesn't change much, but the amperage will, depending on the light levels. Again, here's some more sand for you. This is, again, the molten. They have now turned this right here is molten silicon. That's, you know, everybody says, why is this so expensive? Well, when you've got to turn sand into a liquid to get started, that takes a lot of energy. Then the next thing they do is they touch it to a seed crystal, and they withdraw it, and they spin it very slowly, and they grow rods. Then they come in, and they slice the rods. Originally, they were using diamond cutters, and half of what they had grown ended up back on the floor. They'd throw it back in the pot, and on and they go. Now, the ribbon growth, which you'll see, makes that a lot more efficient. So you can see here, this is pretty complicated.
How do they cut it down?
They use lasers, okay? And when they go to, I'll show you in a minute, okay? This is the polycrystalline, and they can cast it, which saved them a lot of money and time all over the place. That's what the polycrystallines are real pretty. They glitter. You can see the crystals in them. And the single crystallines, you can't. This is the one, this is Evergreen Solar's process. And when I heard about this 20 years ago, I really thought this was the answer, and it's turning out that it is. Because by pulling it through a die, then you're already establishing the thickness. Then they all have to do is come through with the lasers and cut it off. But they went one step further. They made an 8-sided die. And then so that's probably the most efficient way to make a solar cell that we have today. And then what they do is they come in with they cut it this way and then they cut them this way with lasers. And best class performance, they've done really well with that one. 5-year workmanship and 25 years on the module. They have the smallest carbon footprint, quickest energy payback time. They talk about in solar cells, I don't know, we never asked about our cars or anything else, what they say embodied energy. How much energy goes into making the solar cell and how much do we get out of it? Well, you can't ask that of anything else because you don't get any energy out of them. But it's about 2 years and they'll pay for themselves.
Sorry, this is a polycrystalline or thin?
I'm sorry?
It's polycrystalline or thin?
Single. Yeah. Yeah. They have experimented in this country with concentrating collectors. We're hearing about them again. I think they work fairly well in the Southwest. There's a couple things that goes on with them. They have to be perfectly aligned with the sun, so you have to have a lot of mechanical stuff in there. And again, as being a machinist for all those years, when you say mechanical, I hear problems, okay? The other thing is surface temperature of the cell, that for every degree above 25 C, about 75 degrees, a solar cell goes over that, you lose 0.5% of efficiency, okay? And in these things, these cell temperatures are running up 400 or 500 degrees. So there are applications for them. They are using them, not in the Midwest. This is, again, it's a breakdown. It's kind of dated, but it gives you an idea of what they were expecting. Actually, this thing was done back in the 90s. What they expected in cell technology. We're right here. So they're pretty much, I don't see us going there. But we did make it to here. Same thing here. These are more down around 12, 13. Some of them are getting better. Actually, the ribbon growth got up with the single crystalline, and I haven't kept up with the concentrators. Amorphous, they pretty much hit 8%, somewhere in there, and they stayed there. There are some out on the market, and yes, they are. They're hitting right around 12, 11%. So this is fairly representative and accurate in this column to what's going on today. This is what's happened with PV over the years. There's a lot of components. It's just not the modules. They are a big part of it. But you've got the cost of installation, you've got the hardware, you've got the modules, you've got the wafers themselves. And what this graph is doing is showing you where we've made headway, in the last 10 years. And it's really across the board that's brought the overall price of PV down. Where a lot of work's being done right now is in installations. That the companies that are making the racks are doing some very innovative things to pull a lot of the labor out of installing those racks. This is a very basic, simple solar system. It's certainly how I started. Is if you have a small enough solar cell, you can just hook it up to a battery and it'll trickle charge it. If you hook up too big of a panel to a battery, you'll boil the electrolyte right out of it and you'll ruin the battery, which kind of gets expensive. So the industry came up with what's called a charge controller, basically a little brain that goes in there and it looks at your battery, and when your battery's full, it opens the circuit. And PV doesn't care if the circuit's open or closed. So now everybody's happy and you don't ruin $100 and $200 batteries, which I have done. The other thing they do